This is the 20th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, Spro, Gamakatsu, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Good morning, and welcome to another exciting edition of BTL Bass Talk Live, where we are going to talk about bass fishing. A little bit of a different show this morning. I think it's the first time I've done this in the 2 years and a month that I have been solo on Bass Talk Live. It's a Q&A show. We do it with Uncle Frank all the time on Thursdays, where you just type in your questions and then Uncle Frank answers them. And I do get a lot of emails and questions from time to time from listeners and viewers, most of which I'm fairly good about getting back to, but was working on the show this week, and we actually have a very busy week of shows. Brian New tomorrow, 8:30 a.m. He's running a quad box up front, folks, which is 4 12-inch screens, but I'm not sure if he's happy that. Anyway, Brian New requested to come on BTL to talk. So we'll talk to Brian New tomorrow, and then Thursday, day 4 with Frank Scalish, and then Thursday night at 7 p.m. Miles Bergov, I talked about yesterday. If you on social media follow Miles Bergov at all, you know his 10-month-old daughter was diagnosed with cancer. They are currently in Memphis now at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, the main facility. And she's getting treatment today. So we're going to have a benefit show for the Berghoff family on Thursday night, 7 p.m. Central Time. I do have some emails. I did have an email. A gentleman who builds rods wanted to give a couple rods away for the fundraiser. So I need to get back to those to him. And then Friday, Guide Day returns. Like I said, I'm trying to do a lot of guide days here at the start, and then it'll be a every other week feature. But Captain Florentino, Matt Florentino's dad, and Matt Florentino was just on BTL. He does a lot of the media for Aftco, but his dad is a legendary calico bass angler out in Southern California, I believe out of Orange County. Hey, I wanted to do a little bit of a different thing, but they traditionally bass fish for them, like swim baits on jig heads, spinner baits, punching kelp beds, jigging spoons, like all sorts of cool stuff to catch these calico bass. And he's a captain. He guides. You can hire him to go out and catch calico bass. So what I did last night was I posted on the Instagram. It was the first time I'd ever done it. It was like an ask me a question, and I've got probably about 100 responses here. With some really good questions for today's show. So we'll go through that. Also, if you have a question on the instant feedback on YouTube, go ahead and throw those questions in there, and then I will work my way through them. I did want to kick off the show. It is 2024. Some sponsor changes, some sponsor additions. One of the ones that was an unexpected addition for 24, but was really a result of the crappie show that I did with Zeke Anderson towards, I think we did that in 2023. And there were some of the anglers, quite a few of the anglers that were on the BPT that were running this at Toledo Bend this past week. Now, I did not see any of the Bassmaster Open anglers with them on their boats at Okeechobee. This isn't really a accessory that is beneficial for Okeechobee, but BTL proud to partner with Power Breaks, better boat control, more fish catches. And I am headed up to, I think they're in Sapulpa, Oklahoma tomorrow to get the Power Breaks installed. Got a little 1-minute advertisement. They are new with BTL for 2024. And then we can have a discussion about technology. So here's basically what Power Breaks are.
In 2023, we became a household name in the crappie fishing world thanks to Power Breaks, the game changer. Hey, bass fishing world, buckle up, because you're next. It's going to be fun. Welcome to the next evolution of our product line, Power Breaks Sidekick, designed to install right on your shallow water acres. We are the first and only fishing brake company to offer a breakaway system. Just like with the Game Changer, the Power Brake Sidekick has it as well. And it's not a matter of if you're going to need it, it's when. Power Brakes, the most durable fishing brakes available on the market today. Made right here in the USA with our rock-solid 2-year warranty. Hey, not all fishing brakes are built equally, and you owe it to yourself to find out why ours are different. Power Brake Sidekick. Order yours today at mypowerbrakes.com. You'll be glad you did.
So there you go. If you remember when we had Zeke on, he was talking about how everyone in the crappie world had these. They're if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, any of those platforms, think of trolling motor. Think of trolling motors off of your power poles, but you have basically a power pole stop button up front to where if you are going forward while in deep water and want to stop, say you see something on your forward facing sonar on your live scope that you want to fish without blowing out the area, you hit this, the power brakes, which are on the back of the boat 28 feet away, go stop your boat in place. You will see a lot of the Elite Series anglers with these on the boat. I believe that this will just be a standard accessory by the end of the year, just like we're seeing a lot more of the beatdown mounts, the adjustable mounts that are being raised. So anyway, that's the Power Brakes. Jody White, he says, heck yeah, love brakes. We need more stuff on boats. I agree. I think there has to be a limit of how much stuff you can put on the boats, but these, shockingly, I think they're around $2,000 or less, and very easy to take on and take off, minimal battery draw. And I see a huge upside. I've talked to numerous guys who have claimed that they are catching more fish that they see with the power brakes, because, like I said, they're not washing that fish off. They can stay on that fish with their trolling motor. So, all right, let's get to some of the questions, and we'll get through this. Like I said, on my Instagram, which is just at Matt Pangrak, I posted it last night. A lot of good questions came in. And we'll just start at the top. With the no info rule, were you allowed to watch the Toyotas on Okeechobee? Allowed to. So a lot of the information when it comes to information rule, and what he's referring to is the fact that the Toyota Series took place the week before the Bassmaster Open on Lake Okeechobee. So you basically got a really good idea of what was going to go down and where. There was no live coverage for that Toyota Series event. And also there's basically just a daily story and some photos. So not anything that was public information, which it was out on the Major League Fishing website, as far as like the daily wrap-up stories, photographs, all that's public information. The way that you can look at it, you can watch it. You can't call up any of the guys who fish at the Toyota Series or ask them where they did or find anything that wasn't public information. But yeah, I think that's why some of the areas had a lot of boats in them, was because the final day of the Toyota Series was the first day of practice for the Bassmaster Open. So I think that some of those areas got kind of exposed or blown out. But like I said, it was a lot of community stuff there, but a lot of public information. So you had a lot of knowledge. I personally didn't even practice on that Saturday, so I wasn't on the water to see where the Toyota guys were, and then was driving most of the time. But did I peek at the Major League Fishing website? Absolutely. Could I tell based on any photo that I saw where they were? No, because I'd never been to Okeechobee. Never fished a tournament on Okeechobee before. So the next one is Bass Pro Shop sponsors both MLF and BASS. What would it take for them to do an all-star tournament? That's a really good question. And that is something we've seen Toyota get behind with the TTBC, the Toyota Texas Bass Classic, that existed I want to say the mid 2010s, up until Bass kind of took it over and turned it into the Toyota Texas Fest, where they brought all three of the organizations with the top 15 anglers together. The PAA, the defunct PAA, the defunct FLW Tour, and the top 15 of the Bassmaster Elite Series. I would just venture to say that if Bass Pro Shops could find a way to make that lucrative for Bass Pro Shops, that would happen. I think that would have to be a money deal, and it would also have to be where the organizations both agree to it. Right now, the way it stands, I think you would almost have to force those organizations to agree to it, just as far as the vibe that I get is they're not in a great position to work together. But that could change in the future. But yes, Bass Pro Shops is probably one of the few entities that could initiate kind of like a merger tournament between MLF and the Bassmaster Elite Series. What do you think the next big thing will be to try to overtake the popularity of forward-facing sonar? Man, a lot of forward-facing sonar questions in here, and I'll work through them and try to get some other questions in on forward-facing sonar, and then we'll go to the YouTube questions. But this is a tough question to answer, because before the forward-facing sonar, we had no way of knowing that it would be forward-facing sonar. Like, I think it's the accessories like power brakes, like perspective mode. I think the thing that's overtaking forward-facing sonar are the accessories and the additions to forward-facing sonar that we're seeing. That's it. Let's go back to the questions then here on. Yeah, sad news this morning. Woke up, Toby Keith, big OU fan. Moore, Oklahoma has a big water tower on the top of it that says, Moore, Oklahoma, home of Toby Keith. He went to a lot of the club hockey games that I played in back in the day at OU. Also, owner, I think he was a part owner of Lucky Strike Lures. Recently purchased that. So sad day for country music, for Oklahoma, for everyone. Toby Keith passing away. All right. This is where you need an intern. Drunkwood. Yes, I've seen that. What are your thoughts on the new Japanese baits that resembles truck nuts? Hey, they've made the heavy poop and the TRD and all that stuff, are those heavy dense plastic baits work. So I'm not ruling anything out. Here's a question from Tyler Beal. Is everyone running the LVS 34 in forward and perspective, or their LVS 62 in perspective mode? So I was just talking with Scott at the Bass Tank about this. The LVS 62 is not talked about a lot publicly. It is a much larger, it's about 3 times the size of the LVS 34, which is the Garmin forward-facing sonar transducer. The 34 is what replaced the 32, which was the original transducer. It allows it a little bit more clarity in that, a little bit more distance, a little bit more dimension, and a little bit different angle. It's just easier to determine what you're looking at. The 62 is what some people call the saltwater transducer. I don't know if it's actually designed for saltwater or not, but what it has is an upwards of 250 to 300 foot beam. So what we were seeing on Great Lakes and smallmouth fisheries like Thousand Islands and Lake St. Clair last year were anglers who were using the 62 in coordination with the 34. So they were scoping out in forward originally with the 62, and then high bypassing it while keeping their transducer on that fish until they could pick it up with the 34 and then range it in and catch a fish that way. So instead of having basically let's say 120 foot radius with the 34, that's actually you're up to 300 foot radius, which is 100 yards. 300 feet, I believe, is 100 yards. So in any direction you turn the trolling motor, you can tell if there's a smallmouth within 100 yards. What we're seeing now, though, is that perspective mode, which is what Scott Martin showed so much of on the live at Okeechobee in this past open, used in coordination with the forward-facing sonar. Now, the 34 in perspective ranges out 40 to 60 foot, really is pretty much the max for that perspective, but you use the 62 in perspective and you can range out really far. So now you've got a pie slice beam that's 60 degrees that you can pan towards the fish, and then you have your forward-facing sonar beam to where when you see the fish, you can then pan to it. We see the fish on perspective, or the structure on perspective, then you can pinpoint it with the forward. So Tyler, I hope that kind of answers your question as far as how those guys are doing it. And listen, this is not an exact science. You got a bunch of guys that are doing a bunch of different stuff right now. And what I'm interested in is, will this continue to evolve, or will there be limitations put on it next year? I think my gut reaction, based on who I've talked to, there will be either a number of transducer limitations, the type you can have. There's going to be something done, at least on the Bassmaster Elite Series in 2025. I think this is the year that we will look back on and say, holy cow, that was the Wild West of electronics and the forward-facing sonar. And I think it's going to kind of revert back to something that is more manageable, because listen, I have not been a fan. I have not been a fan of limiting anything in the past. And I am now, especially after what I've seen over the past several months, I think it needs to be looked at very heavily. I don't know what the right answer is. If I knew what the right answer was, I would definitely say it. But at least for some tournament competition. And listen, I'm sponsored by the Bass Tank, which is an electronics company, which, I mean, heck, you could put, there are guys that are running 7 12-inch graphs on their boat this year. 7. I have seen the picture. I don't think I can share the picture because it was kind of sent just amongst guys. And they've only have 3 up front. 3 up front in a try box, and then 4. It literally looks like a curved cockpit of an aircraft. And that's because they're running 6 transducers. It's interesting to see what they'll end up doing. On this. All right, James with the good question. He said, where can we listen to all the episodes of BTL other than YouTube? I began listening to Day 4 with Uncle Frank, got to episode 62, but the last 100 BTL episodes were removed. I am working with the Podomatic and the podcast platforms that I'm on to try to get more than just 100 episodes up on that. I will let you guys know what I'm able to find. Otherwise, you can just go on YouTube. You can actually download it from YouTube and watch them that way. But as far as that, I'm not really sure how to do that. I have an email into them. So, all right. What's the latest on the no forward-facing sonar tourney that the dude with the big bucks was trying to put together? All right, I talked to this individual. I can't remember his name. He was talking about it. Luke Duncan was talking about it on BTL when I had Luke on last month. And he was at the Bassmaster Open. I think it's on Lake Lanier, so it's a spotted bass tournament. And they are running one of these with a high-end entry fee, high-end payout, 100% payback, I believe, and no forward-facing sonar and no practice on a spotted bass lake. If any of you guys remember what the name of that one was, let me know. But I think that would be this will be a good litmus test to see if the no forward facing sonar tournaments take off. Along that, there was a question on the Instagram also about if Bass limits or MLF limits or restricts forward facing sonar regulations ahead going into 2025. Do you think that trickles down to the club and regional level? Absolutely. I think for the most part, what we have seen, you know, if outside of like the off limits and stuff, but the general rules translate down to the local, the club, the regional levels. Obviously, that kind of depends on what organization and what, but I mean, if you're a Bass sanctioned event, if you're an MLF sanctioned event, for the most part, you follow those rules because there are steps to get to that top level. So I think if it is limited at the top, or whatever rules they place at the top will trickle down to the Bass Nation, will trickle down to the regional. Along that line, I did mention the Bass Nation. We're just starting to kick off something very interesting, which Hank Weldon worked on really hard, which is a total revamp of the Bass Nation system, the qualifying process. Back when it started, and for those, just like a little brief history of the Bass Nation. So there were, I believe, either 5 or 6 regions, and you would qualify through your club to be, and this was generally how it worked. Each state did it a little bit differently, which is wherein lies the problem, because you had certain states that did it crazy ways, and you had certain states that did it, you know, through a bunch of tournaments. Some guys had it one tournament and they took the top 8, but as a whole, you qualified in the top 10 of your club or the top 8 of your club, and then you would get to go to the state, and then each state did it differently, but they took 10 anglers from that state who would go to the regional, and there were 5 different regionals. You'd compete against 13 other states, and then if you were the top finishing angler from your state at that regional, you went to the Bass Nation National Championship. Now, at the Bass Nation National Championship, there would be 5 divisions, and there would be, I think, obviously 10 anglers in each division, but there were some international anglers. I think Canada was in, Mexico was in. There was roughly 10 anglers in each division at the national championship. Now, the winner of that would go to the Bassmaster Elite Series, but each division winner, so you could finish 15th in the tournament, but if you were the top in the Northern Division, you went to the Bassmaster Classic, and that's how they ended up with the Federation anglers in the Bassmaster Classic. Now, they tweaked that to where if they did away basically with the regions. They did that in like 2014, 15, where if you went to the national championship, you qualified through it the same, one angler from each state. But if you finish in the top 3, you went to the Bassmaster Classic, and the winner still went to the Bassmaster Elite Series. That's what it's been. That's what it was this past year. Now, what is going to starting in 2024 is you can still make your state team, but there's no like Oklahoma State team or Missouri State team. Basically, by finishing in the top of your state based on how many anglers competed in your state, you get an invite or a number of spots directly to the national championship. So there are no state regionals. There's really no state team, so to speak. There is, but those guys are guaranteed to go to the regional. The rest of it is open. So what Bass did was, I believe they have 4 open regionals. You pay an entry fee. There's 250 boats in, or 200 plus boats in each one. And the top like 20% in that regional then go straight to the national championship. So instead of getting one angler from each state out of the regional to go to the national championship, that's 50 to 60 boats, you now have a national championship that takes like the top 20% of each of the regionals that are easier to get into, that have a higher entry fee. You're not on a state team there. And then they go to the national championship. So this year's national championship will be a 250 boat tournament, but the winner will still go to the Bassmaster Elite Series. and the top 3 anglers will still go to the Bassmaster Classic. So more difficult to make the Bassmaster Classic through the Bass Nation, but easier to get to the tournament where you have an opportunity. So that's what they did. They're trying to kind of standardize it, trying to standardize the process and make it more fair for everyone. All right, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, more questions from the listeners, from the viewers. It's BTL on a Tuesday, February 6th. We'll be back right after this.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush. The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top on Strike King.
Any fish, any water.
Get the best patterns backed by tournament data. Start by finding the best 10% of your lake. Know exactly what to look for and what to throw. After that, just put them in the boat. Try the Deep Dive app today.
Look at that beast right there.
My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
Welcome back, BTL on a Tuesday Q&A session. Getting caught up on what's going on here. All right, couple more questions here. Don wants to know, what is it like to have all the ex-BPT guys jump in the opens and take away from your potential spot on the elites? Do you feel they should be allowed to go from the top levels to the qualifiers? Keyword there is Bassmaster opens, open for anybody until. So, okay, here's my opinion on this. I believe that we are not there yet, but we are approaching a situation where you have enough top level anglers with accomplishments, with Angler of the Years, with Bassmaster Elite Series, with BPT wins, to where there is a legitimate need for a middle professional tiered trail that is between 75 and 100 boats that straddles the Bassmaster Opens and the Bassmaster Elite Series. And it's a softer landing spot for the Elite Series anglers that are dropped. And it is an easier way to make a living for the top open anglers and accomplished anglers from other organizations coming over to try to qualify for the Elite Series. Remember, there's a handful of elites of opens guys this year. They've never fished the Elite Series. They weren't part of the group that bailed on the Elite Series and went to MLF and are now trying to get back in. You got guys like Cody Meyer and stuff, and Dakota Ebear, and a handful of those anglers who are leading the security. You know, Cody Ebear made $750,000 over the last 2 years. Cody Meyer, one of the most successful FLW anglers in history, and they're coming over. So do I think that those talks are going on behind the scenes as far as a professional league that straddles the opens, which is kind of the wild, wild west where anybody who has $2,000 can sign up and fish them, and the Elite Series, which is extremely exclusive, incredibly hard to get into. Yeah, I think we're seeing kind of for the first time, especially the last couple years with the anglers and the interest in the open EQs, we got 155 guys that are shelling out $18,000 in entry fees and roughly $40,000 to fish all 9 of these things. And if you finish in the top 45, and you know, it's $200 more for entry fees, but you know, you're still not making much money. I think the last place check was $3,990 in this deal. So that's my thought on that. Steve V, what do I need to know going to the Classic for the first time? You're probably going to pay a lot for parking, and everything's pretty much free. I mean, there's really not much to know. You just need to make sure what is important to you. Especially with Grand going to the Classic. Is it the expo and the weigh-in, or is it Grand Lake and the takeoff? It's about an hour from, up a little bit over an hour from Grand Lake to where they take off in Wolf Creek. So if you are staying in Tulsa, around the expo and where the weigh-in is, that's awesome. Like, you can go do that stuff and not have to travel. But if you want to go watch the weigh-in, if you have a boat that you want to put on the water, just know that you'll be driving 2 hours every day. So your options are either stay in Tulsa for that or split the difference if you really want to be on the water and follow what's going on the tournament and not just the festivities. That would be my biggest part. Or stay in Grove on Grand and then just drive in 1 or 2 days to take in the expo or the weigh-in. I would say you could do the expo in 1 day. It just depends on how crowded it is, and if you're just want to experience it, or if you really want to get in depth and look at everything and all the booze and buy stuff and talk with people and, you know, meet the Bill Dances and Jimmy Houstons and wait in line for all that, then I would do the expo for 2 days, maybe 1 day with the tackle and walking around, and maybe one day to meet all the big time fishing celebrities. Dustin Grant, what's up with all the guys who have longtime sponsors? He mentioned a couple anglers. He said, I saw Mark Rose now striking this boat. Fritz doesn't have Berkeley. Connell isn't with Guggen. That's just the nature of the industry. BTL has had some sponsor changes, some sponsor additions. That happens individually. Most of these guys, all of these guys are independent contractors, and they work with independent companies. And sometimes that lasts for 20 years and sometimes that lasts for 2 years, but people change and things change, and that's the way it's always been. And I think that's the way it always will be. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think that that it's just times change. So let's see. Yeah, Nick said, fine. There is no BTL booth, but I will be in a number of different booths: AFCO, Denali, Sunline, will be at the Pro Guide battery booth at the Classic, and then also will be with Frank on both, I think, Saturday and Sunday, or Friday and Saturday. We'll be at the Bass Tank booth some of the time, and then primarily at the LureNet booth. So Frank is bringing, and LureNet is bringing, Pradco is bringing 100 of the color number 7s right there to give away and to have Frank Scalish sign. So that might be something that you want to get there early for. Yes, and Rich Lindgren, while he doesn't like a top on his hats, he does like comfortable shoes. So definitely bring comfortable shoes if you're going to the Classic. Let's see, what else do we have here? Scott says, hard enough to get money now, especially with the decreased viewers. No one wants to watch as much as they did. So people say that, but then you look at the stats, and stats wise, the viewership was up on the Bassmaster Elite Series this year, even with the forward facing sonar, even with the Northern Swing. So people are still watching the Bassmaster EQs. All right, let's go back to the Instagram questions. Should current Elite Series pros be allowed to fish the Opens EQs? Right now, the way it stands, I have no problem with it. It is the Bassmaster Opens, even though it is a qualifying league. Their points for the Bassmaster Elite Series, like Scott Martin, did not hurt any of the Bassmaster EQs in points. Tucker Smith is leading the points after one event with 199. The way it is, you're only fishing 9 events on the Bassmaster Elite Series. I have no issue with the top level pros like a Scott Martin, like a Brian New, like a Drew Benton, dropping down and fishing the Bassmaster Opens. I think it's good for competition. I think it draws more eyes onto the Bassmaster Opens. And I think that it is an open tournament, so anybody who is in good standing should be allowed to compete in it. Now, like I said, if we go to one of those where there is like a middle level professional tournament with like a $300 or $3,500 entry fee, then yeah, no, that should be exclusive just to those anglers that are trying to qualify. But for the Opens, come on, come and get it. Will one Bass, which is Western Outdoor News, and Bass partnership eventually produce a Bassmaster Classic champion? That's a good question, because One Bass just had their first of 5 tournaments. I think it was on Shasta. It rained for 5 days. I talked to Kurt Dove. He said it literally rained for 5 days straight, especially during the tournament. It was one on-spotted bass. But their Angler of the Year goes straight to the Bass Nation National Championship, 1 at 250. So there is a path from the West Coast to the Bassmaster Classic now. Statistically, very unlikely. Knowing the caliber of angler that will probably qualify from the West Coast, and as long as they keep the Classic in March, which typically means that you are that you're in a cold water scenario, like we are on Grand, like we have been on Hartwell, where you're talking finesse tactics, light line, Demiki rigging, drop shotting, that type of stuff plays, which traditionally plays into the strengths of West Coast anglers. Would not surprise me if one of those West Coast anglers comes out of One Bass, goes to the Bass Nation National Championship, makes the Classic through the Bass Nation National Championship, and then wins the Classic. Wouldn't surprise me, but that path that I just mentioned, you got to have a lot of stuff go right for that to happen. Like, that is a hard road to hoe. Will you ever bring in a permanent co-host to replace Mark? Not right now. I have no plans on the permanent co-host. There was a lot of talk when BTL, first started, just because it was me and Mark. But when I first took it over, I feel like it took a little bit to find it, but I enjoy having different guests on every day. We kind of try to do the repeating guests. Obviously there's a question about when you're going to have Ken Duke back on. We're definitely going to have Ken Duke back on, but Ken Duke is become he's a podcaster now too, with the Bass After Dark show that he does with the Big Bass podcast. He's also doing a bunch of other stuff podcast wise. So Ken is a busy man now, but we will have Ken Duke back on. But yeah, right now, no plans for a permanent co-host. Who is the best co-angler of all time and why? I think you'd have to go. I don't know. There it would have to be someone over at FLW, and you'd have to talk to one of those FLW vets to figure out who the best co-angler of all time was. I mean, Brian New was pretty dang. We'll ask Brian New tomorrow when we have Brian New on. He would know 100%. He would know 100% who the best co-angler of all time is. As a new angler, how do I begin to learn how to break down a lake? Man, there's a lot of good YouTube videos from a lot of good pros on how to break down a lake. Frank has actually done several day fours on this. You can just Google that up or search that up in YouTube. But I'm probably not the guy to talk about how to break down a new lake. What I do when I typically get on a new lake, if it's and it depends on whether it's a natural lake, a man-made lake, depends on whether it has spotted bass, smallmouth, largemouth bass. But for a man-made lake with decent water clarity and multiple species, or even just largemouth, I typically the first day will put in closest to the dam, because there always seems to be a population of big fish down by the dam. Even though it's hard, I will find the first major creek off of adjacent to the dam. And then I will find the first man-made structure that has a vertical and horizontal cover meeting, which is often a dock. Sometimes it's a break wall, a sea wall, a marina, and I will target that. For me, that has worked as far as catching limits of fish, as far as finding keeper fish, as far as locating the bait and figuring out what type of depth the bait is in. That system, day in and day out, like put in, you get good water clarity. You can see what the water clarity is like as you go in. You know you're around fish, a population of fish, where the bait fish live, and then where the horizontal and vertical structure meet allows A, for safety, and B, for ambush for the fish. So there's that's typically, I found a lot of success that, and then based on the depth and shallow it is, then I'll continue to work my way up lake. But that's how I begin to break it down. There's a bunch of other ways that you can look at maps and seasonal patterns. Or you can just get live scope now and not worry about breaking down the lake and just put the trolling motor down and go until you see him, which seems to be pretty popular right now. If these are a lot of forward-facing sonar questions. If forward-facing sonar stays for major circuits, what would you change to improve the viewership experience? That's a tough question. Definitely viewing. I think the MPFL is doing this really well. Definitely viewing the screen with the angler, but I think I don't know. That's a tough question, because I also understand you don't want to see a guy looking there sitting down. Maybe a graph cam where it's actually looking up. So every time the guy looks down, he knows that he's getting that angle of camera looking up. I don't know. That's a tough question right there. What is the minimum amount of money you need to have saved to jump into the opens? That also depends on where you live across the country. We had Julius Mazie on Guide Day. He was trying to do it from Arizona. He's on the road for weeks and weeks at a time because he's 30 hours away from it. If you live in a central hub like in Alabama, I would even say Oklahoma, although we have to go out to South Carolina twice and Florida once this year. I give it about $400 to $4,500 per tournament with the new $2,000 entry fee. And that includes the gas, the lodging, It also depends on practice. Are you running out of tank, or are you going to take out and put in at different ramps? How many days are you going to practice? How many guys are you going to room with? I'm rooming with 4 guys this year. So my housing for the first 2 has been right at $300 each. It cost me $600 to and from in gas. I spent roughly a quarter tank of gas each day of practice at Florida, but that'll change on Ouachita because I'm moving. We all shared food, so we had 0 outside food expenses. It was just like Sam's and Costco stuff. And then I bought a case of water, and I stopped at Buc-ee's and bought snacks. For Florida, I was right about 4,500 to 5,000 in. Now Ouachita will be about $1,000 less because it's only 4.5 hours from the house. So I would say at minimum, if you're willing to do bare bones, stay with a bunch of guys, sleep in your truck, not run a ton of gas, I would say, and you're in a central location, I'd say $30,000 minimum. And that's kind of not having any of the creature comforts. Do the opens conduct polygraphs? Absolutely. Yes. Hank said that they conducted polygraphs last year. They talk about the polygraphs that they conduct in the open EQs, and how many were administered and what went on in the weekly emails. He said there will be more polygraphing this year, more random polygraphing this year for the open anglers, which I think is a good thing. So yes, the opens are definitely polygraphed into definitely polygraphed. All right, let's go back to this one. Here's an idea from Pete. He said, since each angler has a GoPro going, you should be able to click on your favorite angler and watch him live and then be able to switch whenever you want. I agree. They actually tried this a number of years ago on the Elite Series to where you could kind of pick which angler was live streaming. At the time, they just didn't have like a good enough signal. But you've seen what Major League Fishing has done with the power pack on the back of their boat that kind of bands all of the Wi-Fi signals together. So it would be interesting. It would be interesting to do that. Here's a question. Bobby said, you would think Marty would show up on a podcast, obviously talking about Marty Stone. Listen, I reached out to Marty Stone. Marty Stone has been a longtime supporter of BTL. He actually did a In the House, which was a crib style deal with Mark Jeffries back in the day. They're good friends. Marty has always been extremely kind and gone out of his way with me. When I heard that he was no longer with MLF, I reached out. Marty said at that time he was not interested in doing any podcast, but said he would reach out and let me know if that time came that he would jump on BTL. So just kind of respecting that for Marty Stone. I did think that was an odd deal after so many years with the organization. I thought he did a really good job also in the MLF commentator. Listen, that is not an easy job, to do at all. So, all right, let me get another group of questions together. We're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we'll wrap up this Q&A session of BTL. All right, BTL on a Tuesday. We'll be back right after this.
The Spro Little John crankbait has been around for almost 15 years, and it is one of my go-to crankbaits whenever I need a fish in the boat, so you can never have enough new colors. That's why Spro's coming out with a handful of new colors, including Pearl Shad, which has this bleached out white look, but it's got this pearlescent, really, really pretty. We've got Copper Shad, which looks amazing in the water. It's got that purple flake on the back, really, really pops in the water. And then if you want some real pop, we've got Sparkle Shad, nothing but sparkles all over this thing. And then last but not least, we've got the matte Sexy Shad, just a really different looking color for a crankbait. So you want to give them a little different look, that matte Sexy Shad is definitely the one to go with. All these colors are available in the original Little John and the MD. Having confidence in your tackle while on the water is one of the main things to success, in my opinion. In the last couple of years with Denali, I've had just that. from anything from spinning rods, casting rods, tungsten products, even now to casting and spinning reels. I have the confidence to go out there and get the job done and know that all my equipment is going to handle it and do it just the way I want it. The thing about Denali is you've got great quality products at a great price point, so make sure you check them out.
Have you considered purchasing new electronics for your rig? The type of mounts you choose to protect your investment should be part of the decision-making process. No matter if you prefer 1, 2, or 3 graphs up front, Beatdown Outdoors has a solution for you. Adjustable, versatile, rigid, and made in the USA. What's your ultimate electronic setup? Check out the full selection of Beatdown Outdoors products by visiting beatdownoutdoors.com. All right, welcome back. Final segment here of BTL on a Tuesday. Rest of the week, Brian New. Tomorrow, Frank Scalish on Thursday. Special edition, Miles Berghoff and Berghoff Family Fundraiser, 7 p.m. Thursday night Central Time. And then Friday, Guide Day. And then we're headed to Lake Ouachita for the second Bassmaster Open EQ of 2024. All right, let's get back to a couple more questions. He says here, with BTL being our favorite podcast, what podcast do you enjoy listening to? This is a good one. I do not listen to very many podcasts at all. I will listen to any of the big podcasts if there's something crazy. Listen, it's no secret that controversy gets clicks, and I try to mix current events on BTL and stay away from the controversy while letting the guest tell their story and then letting you guys and the listeners determine what you think about that. I will listen to some Mercer. I'll listen to some Luke Duncan, and I'll listen to some of Zal Dangerous, the Bilge podcast. I also will sprinkle in some of the smaller podcasts. There's a lot of really good quality fishing content out there, and I'll find myself listening to, and I'm not even going to start naming all of them because I know I'm going to leave some of them out. But as a whole, like on the way to Florida, I listen to 2 podcasts. The rest is music and talking on the phone. So not a huge podcast guy myself. I obviously listen to the Joe Rogan every now and then, things like that. Oh, Bass. I'll listen to a little bit of the Bass After Dark. Like I said, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff out there that I listen to. But as a whole, I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I just kind of do my own thing on BTL. Hey, why has Chad Pipkins never been on BTL? A smallmouth OG. I'm pretty sure we've had Chad on BTL. He'll definitely get Chad on BTL again, especially as we get closer to that Elite Series season. Should the Opens move to a 150 or 100 boat cap? Listen, I think if that happens, you're talking about an entirely different tour that is in between, like I talked about before, that is in between the Elite Series and the Bassmaster Opens. I think that would be awesome for that to happen. It just is a matter of financial sense. Right now, Bass is filling the fields in the Opens and guaranteeing that 150 guys are signed up for $20,000 to fish all 9. They've got TV coverage 9 days on FS1, so things are rolling. Can you explain your Demiki rig setup in detail? My standard Demiki rig setup, and I fish on Table Rock a lot, and I've caught them around here. I'm not a Demiki rig wizard by any means. I'm proficient with it. I have confidence in it, but you watch what like a Drew Gill or Jacob Wheeler, what Michael Neal, what some of these guys are doing with the Demiki is really impressive. Mine is pretty basic. I'll go 7-pound test Sunline shooter on the leader, 10-pound SX1 braid. Now I'm working with a number of different braids right now. I actually talked to Justin McClellan. There's like 3 different Sunline braids. There's a Overwatch that is metered braid that makes it easier to see. And then there's also some sinking braid that I'm going to work with at Ouachita. But then I go anywhere from, I would say my standard would be either a 1/4 or 3/8 ounce. And I use the Pro Swimmer head from big bite, and then I just like take one of it's got like 2 metal prongs on it, and I break one of those off because it tends to tear the plastic up, and then just a 4-inch shad style bait. And if I want to, I mean, I actually really like the actual Damiki, the Damiki shad that they use. And then most of the time when I'm catching them on it, I'm pitching the bait out to it. I'm not very confident and haven't had a lot of success with like the strolling or the moping like Gussie does. It's more of a cast out at a twitch, and you're putting that bait on the fish's nose, and then you're hopping it and you're making that fish react. It would be the Damiki armor shad, and it would be it's more of a reaction thing than being like, oh, here he comes. Those typically I pitch it past, let it spiral, fall, and that's kind of how I determine the bait. So that's my Damiki rig setup. All right, a couple more questions here, and then we will wrap things up. Has the barrier to entry for bass fishing gotten too expensive? I don't think that the barrier to the entry of bass fishing has gotten too expensive. I think that the perception of what you need to compete at a high level has gotten too expensive. I think there's a perception that you can't compete without the technology. John Cox has proven that is 100% not true, but fishing is such a mental game, and there's so much in between the ears when it comes to success that I think to compete at a high level, there's a lot of guys who think that they have to have certain stuff. I'm not saying it doesn't make it easier, but I'm not saying you can't do it without it. But I think the entry to bass fishing at the highest level has become incredibly expensive. Now, has it become too expensive? That depends on who you ask. And also, if you get into any other sport, especially when you start having sponsorship, especially when you start talking with big dollars, like it's expensive as hell to get into NASCAR, and racing engines cost a lot of money. And if you want to get into competitive sailing or anything else like that, the higher you get, the more expensive it's going to be to compete. So, do you use smaller baits when fishing pressured areas and fish? I'm a big believer in downsizing baits. I downsize a lot more than I upsize. There's some guys who go swim baits. There's some guys who go down. Like I remember on Neely Henry, I caught him really good on a 0.5 instead of I just downsized my crankbait. But I mean, I'll go if I'm not getting bit on a 6-inch worm, I'll go down to a 4.5-inch worm. So yeah, I'm more apt to downsize in pressured areas. Now in Florida, which was the absolute most pressured, I stuck with just normal stuff because everyone around me was blasting them. So these are some of the good ones. Will MLF and bass ever have a merger similar to what's happening in golf? I think so. I think it's inevitable. I don't think and I'm not saying whether that's good or bad for the sport. Actually, I think competition is good for the sport. There's so much good that has happened in professional bass fishing since 2018 with the introduction of Major League Fishing and specifically the Bass Pro Tour. That being said, I also think that especially what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years, the writing is on the wall to where I think a merger eventually, unless something unforeseen happens, a merger eventually is what is going to happen. Now, what I think that will do is that will strengthen the NPFL, which is still around, which will be around because you're going to have a lot of guys without homes when this happens. So then you will still have multiple organizations. Who knows what the landscape will look like 2, 3, 4 years from now, but I think you will always have multiple organizations. But I would be surprised if there isn't some sort of live golf PGA Tour, like a MLF Bass merger within the next we'll just say decade. Here's Gabe. Gabe says, Matt, are you still throwing some of the flat side balsa cranks like the Black Label balsa? Yes, I do throw the Black Label balsa. I actually talked with Cliff Pace. I think he did they've done like a soft plastic lineup now. And that Black Label, like the flat-sided foiled Black Label balsa, is like $15-16. You go through about one a week if you're really chunking it around riprap, but one of my favorite things to throw on that. All right. Most under that's a good one. Most underrated snack from Buc-ee's, as I'm wearing you're using my my Buc-ee's mug right here. Obviously Buc-ee's has a lot of brisket, a lot of beef jerky. God, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I am. So they have a jumbo sausage at Buc-ee's, and it is a sausage on a stick, and it is wrapped in a tortilla, and then they wrap that in saran wrap, and then they stick it in their brisket section, and you'll see it. It looks like it looks like what it is, which is a sausage on a stick wrapped in a tortilla. It's probably about a foot long. That is my that is my favorite Buc-ee's snack. I also like the other thing from Buc-ee's that you guys need to get if you ever go to Buc-ee's is the wax melts. Go into like the home decor section, and they have like really, really good wax melts. So if you're into that. All right. We are an hour into today's show, and I think we're going to end it on the old Buc-ee's question. So thank you for sending them in. If you guys like that, let me know. Like I said, I did it on my Instagram where I just said, hey, ask me a question. And then I took some questions from the comments as well. So thank you for jumping on. We are back to regularly scheduled programming tomorrow with the one and only Brian New. Who knows what he's going to say? His mind was blown at what went down in Florida. That's what I said. That's why he called me. He's like, dude, I want to get on and talk about this. I don't know what he's going to say. I don't know what he's going to do. And then after the show, tomorrow, I am headed up towards Tulsa to put power brakes on the Bass Cat and then head to Lake Ouachita for the second Bassmaster Open EQ. All right, that's all we got for today's show. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow. See ya.